What do you picture when you think of the Middle Ages? Let's be honest, for most of us the image is pretty grim. We see mud-caked peasants, lice-infested clothes, and grimy nobles in drafty castles, all living in a world of filth and stench. This idea of a thousand-year-long dark age, where people just forgot how to be clean, has been hammered into us by movies, books, and even some history lessons. But what if I told you that this picture is almost entirely wrong? Welcome to 10-Minute History. I'm your host, Jake Sullivan, and today we're washing away one of the most pervasive myths in history to uncover the surprisingly clean truth about the Middle Ages. So where does this image of the unwashed medieval person come from? A big part of it stems from the fall of Rome. We all know about the magnificent Roman bathhouses, the thermae. These were colossal, state-funded community centers with hot rooms, cold pools, gyms, and even libraries. The baths of Caracalla in Rome could hold 1,600 people at once. This entire culture depended on incredible wealth and brilliant engineering, specifically the aqueducts that carried millions of gallons of water into the cities. When the Western Roman Empire crumbled in the 5th century, so did this system. The economy collapsed. The aqueducts were cut or fell into disrepair, and the grand bathhouses were abandoned, their stone often carted away to build churches and forts. It's easy to look at these ruins and assume that when the great baths closed, all bathing simply stopped. But that's not what happened. Instead, hygiene just changed. It became more private, more functional, and adapted to a new world. The idea that medieval people never bathed is probably the biggest myth of all. The evidence against it is overwhelming. As towns and cities grew again in the High Middle Ages, from around the year 1000, public bathhouses made a huge comeback. In 13th century Paris, there were at least 26 public baths, known as étuves. Public criers would literally walk the streets shouting, "Lords, to the bath! The water is hot!" These weren't Roman-scale complexes, but they were vital social hubs. You could get scrubbed down, have your hair washed, get a shave, and even have food and drink served on trays that floated in the water. They were places to socialize, do business, and, of course, get clean. Now, these places, called stews in England, did get a reputation for being a bit wild, and in London, the term stews became synonymous with brothels. But their main purpose was hygiene, and guilds would often pay for their members to visit. For the wealthy, bathing was a private luxury and a major status symbol. A typical aristocratic bath involved a large wooden tub lined with cloth, placed near a fireplace and surrounded by curtains to trap the steam. Servants would haul bucket after bucket of hot water to fill it. This was a lot of work, so a hot bath was a genuine treat. And we know they took them. Household accounts for King John of England, the famous villain from the Robin Hood stories, show he was a frequent bather. He traveled with his own bathtub and a dedicated servant called the yeoman of the bath. Records show him taking baths multiple times a month, not once a year. Offering a guest a bath upon their arrival was a sign of great respect and a way to show off your wealth. But what about the common person, the peasant? They couldn't afford a private, servant-drawn bath, but they still washed. Daily washing meant a basin of water for the hands and face, which was essential since most people ate with their hands. For a bigger wash, they'd use a simple wooden tub, and in the summer, the local river or stream was the most convenient bathtub available. A weekly wash, often on Saturday to prepare for Sunday Mass, was common. This brings us to one of the most important and most overlooked secrets to medieval cleanliness. It's not about the bath, it's about the shirt. From the 12th century on, wearing linen undergarments became standard for anyone who could afford them. Men wore a linen shirt and drawers, and women wore a long linen shift. This was a hygienic revolution. Linen is incredibly absorbent, so it wicks sweat and dirt away from the skin, keeping the body itself cleaner. It also protected the expensive outer clothes made of wool or silk, which were very difficult to wash. But here is the crucial part. Unlike wool, linen can be boiled. These undergarments could be removed, boiled in a cauldron with soap and lye, beaten clean, and then laid in the sun to dry and bleach. This process killed bacteria and parasites. Changing your linen was the medieval equivalent of taking a daily shower. A wealthy person might change their linen every day. This simple textile was arguably more important for day-to-day hygiene than anything else. Clean, white linen was a massive status symbol, a visible sign that you were clean and prosperous. Of course, to get things truly clean, you need soap. And yes, they had soap. While the Romans used oil and a scraper, the art of making true soap was perfected in the Middle East, particularly in cities like Aleppo. This knowledge spread into Europe through Spain and Italy. By the 8th century, Spain was famous for its high-quality Castile soap made from olive oil. Soon, soap making was a regulated industry all over Europe. The common type was made from animal fat and wood ash, creating a harsh but effective soft soap. The wealthy imported the finer, scented olive oil soaps. Peasants might use it as a luxury, but more often relied on plants like soapwort, which naturally creates a lather. What about the classic image of the medieval person with a mouth full of rotten teeth? Again, this is mostly a myth. They absolutely cared about dental hygiene. Medical texts from the era are full of recipes for keeping teeth clean and breath fresh. People would rub their teeth with a rough linen cloth. They used chew sticks, which were twigs frayed at the end to act like a primitive toothbrush. They made tooth powders from things like powdered sage, salt, or ground charcoal to scrub their teeth. And they used mouthwashes made with mint, cloves, or wine to fight bad breath. But the biggest factor in their dental health was diet. Refined sugar, the #1 enemy of modern teeth, was an incredibly expensive luxury. The average person's diet was low in sugar and high in coarse, fibrous foods that naturally scoured the teeth. Archaeologists examining medieval skeletons are often surprised to find teeth that are heavily worn down from a gritty diet, but with far fewer cavities than you'd find in a modern population. So people were keeping their bodies and clothes clean. But what about their homes and cities? The story of floors covered in layers of rotting rushes and filth comes from a single famous letter by the scholar Erasmus in the 16th century. It wasn't the norm. People did cover their floors with rushes for insulation and softness, but these were swept daily and changed regularly. And crucially, they mixed the rushes with sweet-smelling herbs like lavender, mint, and chamomile. Walking across the floor would release a pleasant scent, like a medieval air freshener that also helped repel insects. Managing human waste was, of course, a huge challenge. In castles, the solution was the garderobe. This was a small room with a toilet seat that opened into a chute, dropping waste down the outside of the castle wall into the moat or a pit. The name garderobe is French for wardrobe, because the ammonia fumes from the waste below killed moths and fleas, making it a great place to hang your expensive robes. Primitive, yes, but it effectively removed waste from the living quarters. The true pioneers of sanitation, however, were the monasteries. A 9th century plan for the monastery of St. Gall shows an incredibly sophisticated system with multiple latrine blocks flushed by water diverted from a river. A real 12th century plan from Christchurch in Canterbury shows a system even more advanced, with settling tanks to purify incoming water and a continuously flowing channel to wash waste from the monks' latrine into a sewer. This was better sanitation than most of London had until the 19th century. In cities, people used chamber pots. The myth is that they just tossed the contents out the window. While that did happen, it was illegal in most places. Cities had ordinances imposing fines for throwing waste from windows. The famous cry "Gardez-l'eau," from the French for "watch out for the water," was a required warning shouted before emptying the pot. It was a system, not chaos. Far from being oblivious, town councils passed endless laws to improve public hygiene. They paved streets, regulated polluting trades like butchery, and hired official rakers to sweep the streets and cart away garbage. It was a constant struggle, but they were clearly trying. This whole world of hygiene was thrown into chaos in 1347 with the arrival of the Black Death. The plague killed up to half of Europe's population. They had no idea it was caused by bacteria on fleas from rats. Their best explanation was miasma, the idea that disease was carried by poisonous bad air rising from filth. While the theory was wrong, it led to some logical public health responses. Cities launched massive cleanup campaigns, removing all filth from the streets to try and purify the air. But the most important consequence was the birth of organized, state-led public health. The disaster was so huge that governments had to take control. Italian city-states created permanent boards of health with the power to enforce sanitary measures. In 1377, the city of Ragusa, now Dubrovnik, created the first mandatory quarantine. They required arriving ships and travelers to remain in isolation for a period of time to prove they weren't sick. This practice, especially the 40 days required by Venice, gave us our word quarantine. These are the direct ancestors of modern public health departments and pandemic responses. The fight against the plague, born from a lack of scientific understanding, accidentally created the very foundations of modern public health. So, if the Middle Ages were so much cleaner than we thought, why is the myth of filth so powerful? It was largely invented by later eras to make themselves look better. Renaissance scholars wanted to glorify ancient Rome and saw the time in between as a dark age. Enlightenment thinkers in the 18th century portrayed the period as superstitious and unclean to highlight their own age of reason. And 19th century reformers, battling the real filth of new industrial cities, used a caricature of the medieval past to push for modern sanitation. The story of medieval hygiene isn't a story of filth. It's a story of ingenuity, resilience, and the enduring human desire for comfort and health. It reminds us that the people of the past were not so different from us. They developed rational systems, from linen shirts to urban regulations, to create order and cleanliness in a challenging world. And in doing so, they laid the groundwork for the world we live in today. So what are your thoughts on this? Let us know down in the comments. If you found this interesting or learned something new, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to 10-Minute History for more deep dives. Thanks for listening.